Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are jumping right into the timeless relevance of some seriously ancient texts. We're going to be diving deep into the intricate story of the Prophet Musa, the tyrant Pharaoh, and the extraordinarily wealthy Qarun. Now, these aren't just characters from antiquity. They're actually powerful archetypes that speak directly to the human condition right now. So, I want to start by asking you a question. Can a 1,400-year-old story, set in ancient Egypt, actually solve your modern anxieties? I know, it sounds like a massive stretch, right? But as we unpack this narrative together, you're going to see how brilliantly this historical scripture bridges the gap to our modern-day struggles for power, our obsession with wealth, and, honestly, our desperate search for peace of mind. Okay, let's dive right into this roadmap. First, we'll look at the context of these prophetic stories. Then, compare the biblical Exodus with the Quran. After that, we'll break down the illusion of power and the delusion of wealth, reveal the archetype of success, and finally wrap up with some really timeless lessons for your everyday life. Section 1. Context. Stories of the Prophets. So our source material here is heavily rooted in a genre of Islamic literature known as Qisas al-Anbiya, which translates directly to stories of the prophets. Now, what's really vital to know here is that these texts, which draw heavily on the Quran, well, they aren't designed to be simple linear history books. Rather, they emphasize didactic moral blueprints. Basically, they use these chronological narratives to teach profound wisdom and ethical lessons. And you have to remember, the stakes behind these texts were incredibly high. The specific chapter we're focusing on today, Surah Al-Qasas, which literally means the stories, was revealed during a time of intense persecution for early Muslims who were migrating from Mecca to Medina. So it wasn't revealed in a vacuum. It was originally meant to provide deep comfort, really acting as a promise of victory and a blueprint of hope against what looked like completely insurmountable odds. Moving on to Section 2, Exodus and Quran compared. Based on our sources, when we look at these texts, there's a really distinct shift in narrative focus. On one hand, the biblical Exodus often presents a more tribal narrative, focusing heavily on the clash of clans, the Israelites versus the Egyptians. But on the other hand, the Quranic telling in Surah Qasas shifts the focus away from chosenness based purely on race or descent. Instead, it really hones in on individual spiritual accountability, the state of the human heart, and universal moral responsibility. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the text separates the wheat from the chaff. When Musa, or Moses, accidentally commits a crime in a fit of rage by killing an Egyptian, the narrative focus is entirely different. Where the biblical account shows him hiding the corpse, the Quranic text spends considerable time highlighting his intense internal remorse. It focuses on his strict self-auditing and his immediate plea for divine forgiveness. It's honestly a masterclass in taking personal responsibility. Section 3. The Illusion of Power. To really understand power in this context, look at this incredible sequence of events. First, Musa's mother, in what is basically a terrifying test of faith, trusts a divine plan and casts her baby into the river. Second, that river delivers the baby straight to the palace of her enemy, Pharaoh. And third, Pharaoh unknowingly adopts and raises the very boy destined to cause his own downfall. I mean, talk about an epic backfire, right? This sequence perfectly illustrates the concept of tawakkul. That's an absolute, unwavering trust in a divine plan over human scheming. Because you see, Pharaoh serves as the ultimate archetype of political tyranny. He became high-handed, divided his people, and acted as if he were entirely above the law, even going so far as to claim godhood. But the text uses his story as a stark reminder to the reader that unchecked ego, a lack of accountability, and political arrogance inevitably lead to destruction. It shows us that human power, no matter how absolute it seems at the time, is incredibly fragile. Which brings us to Section 4, the delusion of wealth.
Enter Qarun. When he was reminded of his blessings, Qarun famously boasted, "I was only given it because of knowledge I have." Now, this fatal claim right here is the absolute root of the self-made delusion. He genuinely believed his immense wealth was solely the product of his own genius, completely forgetting the divine grace that enabled his success in the first place.
And to put his wealth into perspective for a second, Qarun's treasures were so immense that it required a group of exceptionally strong men just to carry the keys to his vaults. Yet, his hyper-consumerism and obsession with luxury completely blinded him to the source of his blessings. If we draw a bridge to today, Qarun perfectly mirrors modern materialism. That toxic desire to constantly flaunt success, hoard wealth, and just completely refuse gratitude. And this brilliantly illustrates the really poetic nature of divine justice here. Just think about how these two stack up against each other. Pharaoh, the archetype of political power, claimed to be God and was ultimately drowned in the sea. Meanwhile, Qarun, the archetype of economic wealth, claimed sole intellectual credit for his riches and was swallowed by the earth. Both forms of arrogance were met with total collapse, and ironically, by using the very earth and water they thought they ruled.
Section 5. The archetype of success.
So what's the antidote to all this arrogance? It's actually found in this powerful, incredibly humble prayer from Musa. After fleeing Egypt as a fugitive with absolutely nothing to his name, he helps 2 women water their flocks. He then retreats to the shade and says, "My Lord, I am truly in need of whatever good you send down to me." It's the perfect, beautiful counter-narrative to Qarun's arrogant entitlement.
Here, we see that the ultimate archetype of success relies entirely on that concept of tawakkul again. It is the profound shift from anxious self-reliance to a peaceful reliance on a higher plan. True strength is demonstrated by Musa's actions here. I mean, despite being a fugitive in immense personal hardship, he still used his strength to serve and help the weak without expecting a single thing in return. Humility and service, that's what defines real success.
Finally, Section 6. Timeless lessons for today.
So, why does all this matter to you today? Well, first, these stories teach us how to gracefully navigate workplace hierarchies and stand firm against the mini pharaohs, those arrogant leaders we all inevitably face at some point. Second, it's a massive warning to avoid the toxic traps of the mini Qaruns in our hyper-consumerist society. Third, it challenges you to audit your own ego stringently, just like Musa did, and readily seek forgiveness when you slip up. Fourth, it reminds us to couple our everyday worldly actions with sincere humility. And finally, absolutely always use your talents to help the weak, expecting nothing in return.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to reflect on today. When you look at your own life, your achievements, and your success, do you see the grace of a higher plan? Or are you maybe secretly echoing the fatal, self-made boast of Qarun? It's an incredible piece of ancient wisdom that demands we constantly check our own worldview. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I really hope this explainer brought these timeless archetypes to life for you.